Right, today's meal is shredded beef and Seville orange stir fry. The first thing that we've got to do is to cut the meat, so that's what I'll be doing now. I'm using a steak knife just to get through it a bit quicker, and a fork to hold it in place. It's rump steak, very cheap, easy to use, perfectly fine for a stir fry to be honest, just a bit difficult to cut. Naturally I'm cutting it into strips. You can cut it into squares, you can do what you want with it really. One thing I would say is you don't want to make it too large. Being rump steak, it cooks rather nicely if they're quite small strips or small squares. This meal is designed to serve for two, but if you did want it just for one, it's perfectly fine just to halve the ingredients. Make sure you don't get any fat when you're cutting off the steak. I want it to be a nice supple meat to go in the stir fry. Like I say, rump is perfectly fine, but if you can afford sirloin, then feel free to go ahead. Alright, that's about as much meat as we're going to need today. I'm just going to get rid of the next part, wash my hands, and get on with the marinating. Now the marinating is done in a bowl using some dark soy sauce and some orange. A large Seville or Valencia orange is the best to use, but use what's available if you can. Just going to peel the orange quickly. Now if you want to, you can keep some orange peel to use with the dinner, just on the top. That's what the recipe says. Personally, I'm not a fan. However, if you are, the option's there. You'll notice that I'm using a separate chopping board for the meat. Make sure you do that, that's the key one. You've also got to add a tablespoonful of brown sugar into the marinade as well. Just makes it a little bit sweeter. Takes off some of the power of the orange. building up quite a nice juice there. And just squeeze all the juices out. Try not to get any pips through. Once that's done, pick out any pips that you see, obviously. Pop it. And then mix it in. Naturally, you'll have to wash your hands again. Just make sure it gets thoroughly soaked in there. The more measured part of the marinade involves a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of soy sauce. It's brown sugar that you have to use, and it's dark soy sauce. Obviously varieties are perfectly fine. So that's a tablespoon of dark soy sauce. Just tip that onto the meat there. Now if we weren't putting it together, I'd use another spoon, but seeing as we are, use the same one for the brown sugar. Just going to give it a quick rinse, however. But you probably don't need to do that. Always best if the sugar's been opened by someone else first. Just a note, this is soft brown sugar. You will see on the recipe it is slightly different. It does give it a different texture in the end, so it is quite important that you get the soft stuff. Okay, that's all going to need to be mixed in because it's still quite lumpy at the moment. I'll do that in just a second. The longer that you leave it, the more it gets a chance to marinate. You only need to do it for 10 minutes technically, but if it does take a little longer, don't worry about it. You see the juice at the bottom has gone quite brown. You keep mixing it in until you can until you can no longer feel the sugar molecules separate. They should just blend in with the meat. Be careful not to let all the sugar just go to the bottom of the bowl. That's the first mistake. Okie doke, so you leave that to marinate for the 10 minutes. At the same time, you may as well begin to do the rice. Now, the recipe initially said jasmine rice, but personally I'm not a fan of jasmine rice, so I'm just going to use some standard long grain, which you can get from anywhere. Let's take that meat tray out the way. A saucepan. the kettle first. That's a cheat which you'll probably learn or have already learnt throughout your time, but it just boils the water a little bit quicker. Don't have to spend quite so long faffing around. Meantime, I'm just going to place the soy sauce back in the cupboard. Fix up the sugar, which tends to get everywhere, as sugar will do. The rice is going to take 10 to 12 minutes, depending on what rice you use, of course. The stir fry, once it's put on, will take about a similar time, so you want to put them in at roughly the same time. You can make slight adjustments with the way you're cooking. Obviously the rice has got to be boiled, so that's fairly standard, but you can adjust how quickly you're cooking the steak for definite. Need to heat the oil first, as with pretty much anything. When you're putting in a frying pan or a wok as I'm using. Okay, don't put too much oil in, just a little bit.